So let me welcome Professor Giovanni Ferri. Giovanni couldn't be with us today. Giovanni, he is the co-chair of this conference since the start. Also member of the advisory board of Euro-Mediterranean Economists Association and a long-term friend. He's the professor at LUMSA University, professor of economics. And he's the chair and the founder of the Center for Responsible Banking, Economics and Responsible Banking. Is it like this, Giovanni, or I messed it up?
You're right.
Okay, cool. And Giovanni today will talk to us about the evolving ESG landscape, since he has worked a lot on this topic since many years now. And also worked on a almost annual monitoring of ESG and sustainability. So please, Giovanni, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Prem. I'm really sorry I could not join you physically, but it's a blessing that we can be in touch this way. And let me share my little presentation, which is not really serious as the previous presentation, which is based on real data. And these are some considerations of mine at this point on the evolving ESG landscape, from reporting to real impact. And since I am the only threshold between you and lunch, I will try to be very brief. So what is this little presentation about? I will give you some additional hints on how ESG reporting shapes the behavior of businesses, and then I'll give some reference about the global use of ESG metrics that leads me to the next point, which is what happens to ESG in the United States after the ESG and other DEI and other policies that are sustainability friendly have become, in a sense, put out of the political agenda. And I will, hopefully this is not just wishful thinking, I will talk about reframing of ESG in the US rather than abandoning ESG from US. And I will give a little touch on finance, which is the driving force of most of our changes, and how I will spend a few words on how finance needs ESG the most. And finally, there will be some key takeaways from this reasoning. So ESG is something that, as we all know, is new in town, came about 20 years ago. And before that, there was corporate social responsibility. ESG is different. It evolved from voluntary reporting, and it has always been interlinked with strategic governance. And now, in the firms that adopt this metric, ESG influences also risk management, planning, and operations. In a sense, whereas the CSR could be thought of as something which embellished companies, ESG is, if it is taken seriously, it changes the business model of the companies. What is the impact on corporate behavior? Some reflections on this. First of all, there is this issue of long-term risk internalization. ESG is a metric that should, in a sense, internalize the externalities that are normally not accounted in the way business operate. Long-term risk internalization is one of the results of that process. Also, ESG affects executive incentives. ESG affects reputation and the ability for a company to attract talents. And it may lower the cost of capital having good ESG level. In terms of the global adoption of ESG metrics on the basis of some surveys that are available, we can see that about 90% of the S&P 500 companies report ESG. And Europe, the European Union, is ahead with about 95% and even more. But this is due to mandatory corporate sustainability reporting, initially the non-financial reporting directive, and now, although with some limitation, the corporate sustainability reporting directive is going to increase that. Asia Pacific is about 70%. There is a big difference. Latin America is even lower. The Middle East is lower yet. But it's not only the level of ESG adoption, as it was mentioned in the previous presentation. ESG levels in Europe tend to be higher by between 15 and 20%, depending on the papers. There is clear evidence of that. Why ESG faces a backlash in the United States? Well, there is political polarization and anti-ESG laws. Project 2025, which is something elaborated among the others by the Heritage Foundation, which is an organization financed by oil industry and other backward industries, sunsetting industries, we might mention, has indeed worked towards that over the years. There have been publications and advocacy that has been done. And now with the second Trump administration, much of that is being implemented. On the other hand, there has been reputable publications showing that ESG ratings were not that consistent, depending on which rating agency was releasing them and depending on other circumstances. So what we can see in the US is a shift to climate financial risk reporting directly on materiality. And there tends to be an avoidance of ESG terminology, which is rather embarrassing for us, for Europeans, because we have inherited the ESG metrics from the United States, and now we are left with ESG metrics in our relations, whereas the US seems to be dwindling on the use of ESG. Finance needs ESG the most. Why? Because financial intermediaries and markets have the highest exposition to climate transition and reputational risk. And so ESG is used also for credit scoring and risk pricing. And ESG reduces information asymmetry. What we can think of ESG, if ESG is reliable, is what ESG is doing is reducing information asymmetry indeed, whereas in the past, we could think of information asymmetry, particularly referring to banking markets, insurance markets, as a way of claiming to be a good customer, a good borrower, or a good insured people. But in reality, you are not. Now, in the world of sustainability, we have that you can claim to be green, but in reality, maybe you are not, and this is called greenwashing. I'm sure you have discussed about that, and there will be further opportunities to discuss about that. So ESG reduces the probability of greenwashing if ESG is truly trustable. And therefore, it is most important for finance, because finance works a lot on that. This is a projection of what happened between 2012 and 2022. On global level, the percentage of large firms that I could collect some data from secondhand moved from 20% of them to about 80% of them in 2023 that were reporting ESG. Doing ESG reporting is therefore something which is rather widespread, and probably it will continue to affect business model adaptation and business model modification in the future. The key takeaways of these short reflections that I put together for this very short intervention of mine can be summarized in these 4 dot points. ESG is doing something which is introducing a large spectrum of changes. So it comes from reporting, but it has become a very powerful instrument towards strategic transformation within companies, and not only companies. The US probably will reframe ESG. It will not make reference so much US companies to ESG, but I don't think there will be a total abandonment of the metrics. The European Union has standardized ESG. ESG, as you know, is clearly referred in 3 of the 10 points of the Action Plan on Sustainable Finance, which was approved in March 2018, 1 year and a half before the approval of the Green Deal in Europe. We have discussed that finance relies on ESG for risk pricing and for other issues. And about the future, we have to become better at measuring the ESG impact, not so much looking at the ESG labels. In the interest of brevity and in the interest of your lunch, I would stop here, but I'm available if there are some questions or interventions.
Thank you, Giovanni. I take one question. Yes, Stephen.
I just wanted to know who who is doing the independent evaluation of impact. Is there a body, or is it formalized, or what happens?
Well, normally ESG are supported by third-party valuations that tend to be by independent parties, and this strengthen the validity of those ESG scores. So normally that is done by the best practice.
Tahir.
Thank you, Giovanni. It's just a comment more than a question, because currently we are working also on a project where we try to see to what extent the participation into global value chains increases the likelihood of adopting ESG norms, and what kind of norms. And we do find that this exposure and the obligation of abiding by international rules increases the likelihood of adopting such ESG norms. So I was wondering, from your experience in this field, Is this in line with your work in general, and what the exposure into global value chains can really lead to that? Thank you.
I wish that can be true. I don't have evidence to support that, but I haven't studied this issue. My reflection on the global value chains at this time of history is that most likely the global value chains, the role of the global value chains will be reduced in the future because the import tariffs and the general approach to step out of free trade are going to impact the global value chains. And we might see, and maybe we are seeing already something like that, a reshoring and a shortening of the global value chain, a friendly reshoring, and something like that. So I don't have an answer to, but I wish you're right.
Giovanni, I have one last question, maybe just to be, you said that ESG reduces information asymmetry and eventually reduces greenwashing if ESG scores are trustable. But do we really believe that ESG scores are trustable, particularly if we have mainly focused on the E and S and G are completely put aside? So this is one comment. My second comment is, shouldn't ESG be supported or reinforced by another type of indicators, which could be developed by researchers, independent researchers, eventually connecting or testing the greenwashing concept? Because we know that EBA, for example, and other authorities have developed consultations on greenwashing, and this data is there. So eventually one could develop alternative indexes that could complement the ESG, for example, greenwashing indexes, and that would eventually assess the capacity or the real changing behavior of the companies.
I think you're right. As I mentioned, we can assume that there is a role of ESG in reducing asymmetric information only if ESG are trustable. And the way they have been manufactured is not always trustable. There is a very famous paper by Berg and others at Sloan Business School of MIT, which is called Aggregate Confusion, where they show, looking at past data for the past, ESG data for the past, that there tend to be very little correlation across different rating agencies, the main rating agencies, for the same companies receiving ESG from them. So it's not only politics. Certainly, there is now politics in the US, which is working against ESG. But there is also a true problem of reliability of the ESG. And probably the third-party confirmation, as it was mentioned in my previous answer to another question, is a way out to reinforce the reliability of ESG ratings.
Annie, and then we break for lunch.
Thank you very much.